think the traditional model has some huge merits. And although there are forces wanting to change them, I don't think that will change overnight. And I don't think it'll change at all unless consumers really see the benefit in it. And so I think we're on a very long glide path to our sort of fully digital dealership. There might be one or two showcases by 2030, but I suspect it will be a handful.
That's quite reassuring, I think, really, isn't it? It's an exciting future, but I think, as you've described, it's a bit longer than 10 years. We've got a lot longer to wait for that, and I'm sure that will give a lot of the viewers a bit of reassurance about what's going on at the moment. Hello, and welcome back to the Armchair Show, where today I'm joined by Jim Holder, who is the Editorial Director at Haymarket Automotive. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
This isn't your first time on the show, is it? You've been on before.
Exactly, I should be very relaxed and very fluent, but let's see.
Well, we must have liked you because we've got you back on. And this time we're in the studio, because obviously last time we were remote on Zoom, weren't we? Which was all very strange.
Absolutely, live from the front room.
Yeah, definitely. Jim, just for the people who perhaps aren't aware, can you tell me a little bit about Haymarket, please?
So Haymarket publishes Whatcar, Autocar, Classic and Sports Car, and Car Accessory Trader. There are 4 titles in the automotive space.
Yep.
Founded by Michael Heseltine many years ago, still owned by him, so privately owned publisher. Publishes many other titles, but my very specific interest and sphere is very much the automotive side of it. And I suppose probably 4 years ago, we made a few headlines. We made a huge multi-million-pound investment into trying to really move from being straight publishers into the sort of digital e-commerce space.
Yep.
With a sort of lead generation model for the car dealers. You know, we have 100,000 people, would-be car buyers on Whatcar every day, and just really linking them up with dealers, and that really has transformed our business to some degree.
I bet it has. Okay, and in your time, many years you've spent in the industry, what's the biggest thing that's changed over the last 10 years, say?
I think certainly in our lives, you can't underestimate the sort of the way the internet has changed our lives.
Yep.
You know, we used to go to work and it filled every waking hour just filling a magazine once a week or even once a month. And actually, you know, our team size now is smaller. You know, we sell less magazines, so the profitability took a hit. We had to find ways to get around that, but at the same time, we also had to find ways to grow our digital side.
Yep.
So, you know, perhaps we don't do as many 3 a.m. finishes trying to get a magazine out the door, but instead we start a couple of hours earlier and we finish a couple of hours late every day, just trying to keep the internet fed. And that really is a sort of never-ending task. But, you know, today, and actually for a good many years, we've been more profitable digitally than we have through print. You know, print is still healthy, but it's now the second thing we think about. And actually, there's a generation of journalists who've had to change that mindset. You know, we do have to think digital first now because it's where the readers are and it's where the profit is. So, you know, that is a mindset shift that, you know, old people like me have had to get used to.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think it mirrors what's happening in the industry as a whole, doesn't it? Because a lot of dealerships, again, will have a lot of traditional salespeople who are having suddenly to do, you know, Zoom calls with customers. Is that fair to say? Do you think they're probably experiencing the same challenges with that you guys are?
Yeah, I think I remember it very well. It's a very uncomfortable experience, but actually publishing went through its moment of horror a good many years probably before the car industry has. And the car industry has, you know, almost been notable and almost admirable for being able to resist the rest of the world changing around it. Yeah. But there's no turning back. You know, there never was going to be any turning back, but this has been, certainly the last 6 months, been a catalyst, I think, for you know, a massive shift that just will not be dialed back. You know, it will only accelerate. So yeah, absolutely, there are new ways of working, new ways to think, and you have to approach it with that open mindset. Otherwise, you're doomed. And actually, you know, it's a brutal process. As I say, I can remember going through it. It is an absolutely brutal process. Not everyone can get through it. But, you know, it's that open-minded, positive, try anything approach that really gets you through in the end, I think.
Yeah, like you say, that the fact you've been through this already gives you a great insight into that. What's apart from the open mindset type stuff, what's your main piece of advice to dealerships who are perhaps watching this and thinking, yeah, we're scared, you know, this is all changing, we don't know what's going on, this guy has clearly experienced this in a different, admittedly a different realm, but it's all the same really, isn't it? It's digital,
Yeah, yeah.
etc. What would your main advice be to those people?
It's the best piece of advice I was ever given came in 3 words, and it was "Don't fear change," which sounds very simple, but actually, I'm quite a conservative mindset person, or try and live in my comfort zone, etc., etc. Change, generally brings out my fears.
Yeah.
But the moment you stop fearing change, and the moment you try it, you experience it, and actually, if you just go out there and if you're confronted by change, don't freeze. Make a decision. Even a yes or a no, you can still end up in a good place with both of those decisions.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you keep moving with pace and purpose, then the results you'll either learn from them or you'll do well from them.
Yeah, totally agree. And what do you give? Obviously, you talk and interview a lot of big names in the industry. I'm guessing other people as well. And what's the general feeling you get about what it's like to work in the automotive industry at the moment?
Yeah, I think there are 2 mindsets here. There is an awful lot of change, and that can induce a bit of panic and fear. The people I enjoy talking to most, and generally the leaders of the businesses, they just want to embrace the change. And even if they're going into something where they don't know the outcome now, they're happy to throw their weight behind it and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. And yes, it can be quite painful, and yes, it can be quite brutal. But how are you going to get to this end period of the change without trying things and learning from them?
Yeah.
And the very best leaders that I'm certainly interviewing, of course, they have a long-term vision, but they have probably 12 versions of it, and they're happy whichever one they end up at. Just embrace it, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. And something we picked up on a little while ago on LinkedIn, I think it was, from you guys, about diversity in the industry as well. And we've spoken about this before on the show. What's your opinion on that in terms of what does the industry have to do at the moment to really drive that forward? We all know about the 30% target. What does it need to do?
I think it needs to get the leaders moving everything in the right direction. And I think actually there is a very strong group of leaders now who really are determined to make a change. But unless it's coming from the top, I don't think it will pull through. I think it's a pity in a way that the industry is so far behind, because I think to be able to make the change visible will take an awful long time. I'm very bored of going to board meetings and reporting on them, and you open up the booklet before you report, and there it is. It is the old white male stereotype. It's absolutely alive and well. But of course, they've got the experience, they've got the talent, and I do think change has to be driven on merit.
Yep.
And I do think that will take time, and a long time. But there are seeds of change happening now, and I hope and believe it will only accelerate. But there is a huge, huge job for this industry to do, no doubt.
Yeah, probably too much for this 20-minute podcast, but I'm sure we'll get onto that at some stage in the future. But thinking more positively, I suppose, what do you think the industry does really well at the moment?
I think the industry is very, very good at innovating. And I think this is always the thing that stood out and really excited me and why I wanted to become a journalist, because whatever challenges are thrown at it, it does find solutions, and it always has. Over 120 years, it's always found ways through whatever the crisis might be.
Yep.
And I think, it's that flexibility of thought. I think it's the absolute ingenuity of the engineering. It's the world-class marketing. It's easy when you're in the industry just to take it for granted and you're part of something and it just goes about its everyday business, but it doesn't. These are brilliant, brilliant people overcoming, massive, massive challenges. Probably bigger than almost any other sphere. Maybe building moon rockets is harder, I'm not sure. But
well, maybe not.
These are vehicles that have to do so many things, appealed on so many levels. They can't fail. The brilliance that goes into that is just captivating.
It's exciting, isn't it? I think really, but again, I know we've spoken to certain people and they've said that it doesn't feel exciting enough sometimes. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the industry can be its own worst enemy, and I do think when you're part of a large operation, some of the magic can come out of it. When you talk to the guy who, it's brilliant saying a new car's been tested over 1 million miles, but when you're the guy who's had to drive it, 100,000 motorway miles, so you're probably not completely in love with doing that all day, every day. But so when you break it down, I think the excitement absolutely underlies it. But the industry could definitely do a far better job of highlighting, really the excitement that lies within it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think it's the same for customers? So, what's it like to buy a car these days? Is it? I mean, I love cars, so I enjoy buying cars.
Yeah.
I get, obviously, you're a car man yourself, so I'm sure you're the same. But there are people out there, unbelievably, who don't like the process of buying cars. What can the industry do to make that process for those people nicer and more enjoyable?
Buying a car is a pain in the backside, and no matter how into it you are, there's always going to be a point where you're like, oh God, have I got to do this?
Why is that though? What do you think? Why is it such a pain?
I think historically, if I'm brutally honest, car dealers have set the industry up to work for them, not for their customers. And I think probably the OEMs have been part of that process as well. I think a digital world is stripping that away. And what I believe the industry needs to do is use digital to its advantage, all the bits that are painful, get them online. Yep. And that's happened to a very large degree already. Such a large part of the research process is done online.
Yep.
Now you can talk to the dealer online, you can get through, you can agree a price, you can agree the terms, you can agree your part exchange, all those really irritating negotiations you can do from your sofa.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's a huge, huge step forward. But then you want to ensure that the fun bits, you can go and enjoy them. And that's why you have to believe, I have to believe, the dealership has a part in this, and it's a fundamental part in it, is that when you get to the point that it's absolute joy and excitement, as buying a very expensive, exciting product should be,
yep.
Go and make the most of it. Really get the bells and whistles out and make the person feel special. And that should be brilliant retail experience. And that is the opportunity that really is there if people embrace it. And
retail is the key word there, isn't it? I think we've had a few people say retail rather than the traditional terms that the industry has obviously had. And what role does, thinking about the online experience, obviously customers come into dealerships much more informed these days, don't they? How can dealerships deal with that? Because suddenly you've got people coming in who have read reviews, they've watched videos about cars, they've formed what they believe to be a rounded opinion. Sometimes it might be bang on, sometimes they may have misread information or read the wrong types of reviews, which do exist, as we know. How do dealerships deal with that? Because that's a very different sales challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard for a salesman to know every single car that they're selling, as well as the person who's focused in on one. And that is a challenge. I love the idea of product geniuses that are being used more and more. Less salesman, more genius. But I also think you listen to your customer. If they do know more than you, admit it, and it's express that you are going to go away and look up some details and be sure of what's being said to you. It's a two-way conversation, and for too long, selling a car has been a one-way conversation.
Yeah.
And if you change that approach, I do honestly think people will warm to you and come with you. A bit of humility and a bit of honesty and a bit of, do you know what, I will go and check that and help you out. Goes a long, long way.
Absolutely, totally agree. And changing tack slightly, you arrived today in a electric car, didn't you? And I had to admit that I've never driven one. I've never been in one. What's the experience been like? Yeah,
I am a huge fan of electric cars, and always have been. But I think you have to try them before you really can form an opinion on them. And I think that's the real challenge for the industry. Really, you can't do a test drive for the whole of Britain to really persuade them of their abilities. There are compromises, undoubtedly, but there are plus sides as well as negatives. Last night I forgot to charge my car in, so I set off knowing I wouldn't be able to get home.
Yep.
But do you know what? I stopped at a fast charger in Milton Keynes for about 25 minutes.
Okay.
Put close to 100 miles of range in. I'm sat here, not a bead of sweat on my brow.
Totally relaxed.
You just have to plan a bit more.
Yep.
You have to be a bit more adaptable. Sometimes you do have to sit and do your emails for 25 minutes. But that's no bad thing. I'm more relaxed because I've done my emails rather than just driving here in a sweaty mess.
Yeah.
And the driving experience, I find it quite addictive. Not chasing to get there in the last 10 minutes anymore. Save myself 10 minutes.
Yep.
I'm looking to save myself 10 miles, and so I drive a bit slower. I read the road a bit better. I'm more relaxed in the chair. It's silent. There are lots of positives. So again, don't be scared of it. Embrace it. Yes, you have to force yourself into some situations. But I've taken electric cars to my in-laws in Wales, 250 miles.
Okay.
Wife and kids in the back. If it went wrong, my life was over. It's been fine.
That's a real test, isn't it?
That's when you know. Yeah.
And do you think, is it the future? I think there's lots of different opinions on this. are we going that way? Are all cars going to be electric? Is it the end of the diesel, etc.?
Yeah, we have no choice is the very simple answer. The consumers may not want it, and there will be consumer resistance back to people fearing change. But legislation will force it, whether that's 2030, 32, 35, 40, whatever's being discussed, we'll find out soon. But at that point, all new cars will have to be electric, and that will filter through into the car park over the following years. Of course, technology will advance by then, charging technology will advance by then, prices will come down. All the barriers that certainly when we polled the Whatcar audience, we know are there, should be increasingly swept away. And this is what I always say now, if you're looking at an electric car, it may not be for you. There is a limitation. There are many limitations.
It's compromises, isn't it? I suppose.
Absolutely, but they will reduce, and actually, some people may be forced into these cars, but I don't believe that they will find particular problems with them when they do make that leap.
Yeah, it's going to change things quite considerably, but I'm looking forward to driving my first electric car at some stage. Like you say, I won't form an opinion until I've done it. Definitely not. And just wrapping up, what do you think the car dealership of the future will look like? I mean, bearing in mind all these things that are changing, the digital transformation, the changes to the drivetrain, etc. What will the dealership of 2030 look like if you walk into it?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question with a very difficult answer. There are all sorts of moonshots out there at the moment where every car will be connected to the dealership. It will know when you're about to arrive. It will have already diagnostically worked out what's wrong with your vehicle. Everything will be super efficient. The moment you arrive, your courtesy car will be there, or you might not even need a courtesy car. I actually think the time frame, if you talk 2030, it's not long enough. We're now 10 years away from there. What will have changed, in these frankly hugely invested in premises? Probably not a great deal, because it takes longer than that. We're meant to be flying around in the 21st century in our flying cars.
Should be on hoverboards now.
Exactly.
According to Back to the Future, that's where we should be.
One
now.
day we'll get there. But I think the traditional model has some huge merits. And although there are forces wanting to change them, I don't think that will change overnight, and I don't think it'll change at all unless consumers really see the benefit in it. And so I think we're on a very long glide path to our sort of fully digital dealership. There might be one or two showcases by 2030, but I suspect it will be a handful.
That's quite reassuring, I think, really, isn't it? It's an exciting future, but I think, as you've described, it's a bit longer than 10 years. We've got a lot longer to wait for that, and I'm sure that will give a lot of the viewers a bit of reassurance about what's going on at the moment. So, Jim, it's been great. That's time's up, unfortunately, but we could spend all day talking. It's your second time on. Hopefully, it won't be your last. We'll definitely get you back in at some stage, maybe in the main studio. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Armchair Marketing.